No mai hoki mai rai te iwi. Welcome back to our online discussion pertaining to our kaupapa Recloaking the Whenua Mātai Smith. Nice to have your company with us again. We had a slightly shortened lunch break. We're trying to get back on track, and to kick us off with session 4, anea no te kaupapa mo tēnei wāhanga, economic, social and cultural well-being with native forests. It gives me great pleasure to welcome our first guest speaker, Mr. David Bergin from Tane's Tree Trust. His kaupapa kōrero is plantings of native trees and lessons from the Northland Totara project. So let's hear what he has to say about this kaupapa. Kei a koe, David.
Hi, I'm David Bergin. I'm from Tane's Tree Trust, one of the trustees, and I'm going to give you a bit of a rundown on some of our work in Tane's Tree Trust, specifically planting and management of natives. And I would like to acknowledge my son Michael Bergin and my colleague from Tane's Tree Trust, fellow trustee Jackie Amos, who's helped me with this presentation. So who are we, Tane's Tree Trust? We are a charitable trust established in 2000 with the following aims: to promote best practice establishment and management of native forests for multiple benefits, reducing the impediments to establishing natives, identifying information gaps and research priorities, undertaking applied research and technology transfer, developing and managing databases, disseminating free information, and providing technical support to Trees That Count and other entities like that. So, go to our website, which you can see there. And really our vision is to see the majority of New Zealand landowners successfully establishing and sustainably managing native trees for multiple purposes. Now, I mentioned Trees That Count. I'm the technical advisor to Trees That Count nationally. Trees That Count was established in 2016. It is part of the Project Crimson Trust. And at Trees That Count, we aim to encourage New Zealanders to plant more native trees, promoting their multiple benefits. We have a marketplace which is matching funded trees to planted groups and landowners. So those of you who are interested in some support for your trees, please get in touch with Trees That Count. We are supporting several flagship planting projects nationwide. We are developing methods for monitoring the success of your plantings, and we have a network of regional advisors to provide advice. And your advisor for Tairāwhiti is Kirsty Gadam, and her contact details are there, so feel free to get in touch with her. Our current projects, back to Tane's Tree Trust, our current projects, we've got a whole raft of projects underway. Tyndall Foundation partially funds us, and we've got 4 work streams listed under there, as you can sort of see. The Northland Totara Working Group is an entity within the Tane's Tree Trust. And again, we've got a number of projects underway. We have a very exciting project looking at developing a forestry toolkit for planted native forests, and that is going to be launched in December, and that's a whole series of calculators and models and resources that will all be within our website and freely accessible. We've got a project at the moment looking at how to convert the failing exotic buffers along our coasts to native in response to issues with climate change. We've got a fact sheet series for the 1 Billion Trees project, which is underway for Tuarakau. And again, you'll see the first of those being launched over the next few months. We've got some videos to match those fact sheets on best planting practice. We just finished our report for Tuarakau on disruptions to the nursery and planting sectors from lockdowns, such as we've had with COVID-19. And I would encourage you to go to this website at Pure Advantage. There's a link at it from the Tāne's Tree Trust website, Tata Ngāhere, where we have collected a number of experts nationwide to write articles and contribute to webinars on management of native forests and all the benefits of native forests to all of us. And we have a whole range of forestry databases that we're managing as well. So today I'm just going to go through very quickly about four areas to do with planting and managing of natives. I will touch on them. I will touch on it fairly quickly, but then you can see that there are links back to the website for more information. So firstly, I'll look at best practice planting. Then we'll look at the planting database and toolkit work that we're doing. An area that is becoming of increasing interest to us and others is regeneration, working with nature. What can we do to help nature do a lot of this work for us? And lastly, a quick look at silvicultural work we're doing and continuous cover forestry. So best practice planting. I'm not going to go through this point by point. I think we all know why we would like to see more native forest established. Reducing hill country erosion and sediment into our rivers is obviously a fairly major issue for Te Rāwhiti as it is for other regions. Cultural values, the opportunities to do timber production from some of our forests from appropriate sites in the long term, right down to the non-timber forest products that some of which we already know about, like manuka honey, and things that we haven't been discovered yet, as well as carbon sequestration, are all part of why we should be establishing native forest. And one of the big areas that we've put a lot of work in is non-timber values, ecosystem services. There's a growing awareness of the importance and vulnerability of New Zealand's natural capital, and we rely very heavily on forests to provide these benefits that are listed here underneath that. So we really need to recognise non-timber values as quantifiable assets that would encourage forestation. But there's some challenges there. Methods for determining the monetary values are still being developed. How can we monetize, put a value against these non-timber values? And we have a brand new publication on non-timber values. It's a 100-page review by Dr. Jackie Amos. And there's a link there for you to go and get your download. You can download your own free copy on that. And we've split up the categories of non-timber values into those various points there: non-timber forest products, environmental regulating services, and socio-economic, spiritual and cultural services. So have a look at that report. It's well worthwhile looking through. And one of the things that Tāne's Tree Trust is really keen is to promote our wonderful high value specialty timbers from natives. And there are opportunities, admittedly long term, for the planter stands, for the regenerating stands, to provide from appropriate sites a supply of decorative timbers, as you can see from the photographs there, and under the Forest Act, of course, using sustainable forest management plans, and of course using continuous cover forestry methods, so that we are retaining the high forest values. Getting back to establishing native forests, there are three main options, if you like, three things to consider: planting, managing natural regeneration, direct seeding. And the planting, I guess, is the one that most people are involved with when it comes to establishing native forests for a whole wide range of areas. And it can be for just restoration, because we just want to see more natives established from a scenic or a biodiversity point of view, right through to planting native timber tree plantations. and also a lot of interest in converting of exotic plantations to natives. But when it comes to a large scale establishment of native forest, I think we've got to be looking more at natural regeneration. And there are there are 3 or 4 issues there that need to be tackled if we are to be successful in regenerating our native forest, trying to give nature a hand to get there for us. And planting will be a part of that. And then lastly, direct seeding. This is often held up as the holy grail. It's often where you get the high-tech offers for drones and what have you to spread seed and to make it easy to deploy. But the viability of direct seeding on a large scale has really still got to be investigated. Weed competition in New Zealand, because we've introduced a lot of exotics, is really a major issue when it comes to the success, the recruitment of seedlings from direct seeding. But it's worthwhile keeping in touch with it. And I'm not going to go into all of the many questions that are around how to plant natives and manage them. A lot of the information is already available on our website and on various council websites, DOC and what have you. But if you've got specific questions around matching species to site, or why do I need to use a nurse cover, and through to what should I be looking for, what should I be ordering from the nursery in terms of seedlings, grade of seedlings, size, etc. Right through down to how do I monitor and maintain my planting site. All of that information is readily available from Tane's Tree Trust as well as other sources. But the very bottom point there, starting small, modest beginnings, avoid difficult sites initially, build up experience. Every site is different, every year is different. So, just feel your way and don't be too ambitious in the first year or two. So, at the end of the day, it is relatively high cost to establish native forest on bare land. I'm on record as for 20 odd years or more by saying it's costing $20,000 per hectare for planting native forest, blanket planting native forest on bare land. However, others are planting natives from $5,000, for instance, by the Manuka industry, to $40,000 per hectare on difficult sites such as parts of the Canterbury, because it's very droughty and very difficult to get seedlings away. And of course, if you take a $20,000 hectare average cost for natives, that's 10 times what it costs to establish radiata pine at about 2,000 stems per hectare. So Tane's Tree Trust, along with others, are working to reduce costs of establishing natives. And we can sort of see from this table that if you are planting at high density, 1 by 1 metre or 1.5 metres space apart, 10,000 to 4,000 stems per hectare, the costs are enormous, per hectare. They're just enormous. Prohibitive, really, if you're doing it on scale. Go to the other end of this of the table here, to the right-hand side. Low density, you've got the options of planting it at 3 metres apart or 4 metres apart, 600 to 1,100 stems per hectare, and your costs drop dramatically. But have a look here. This is the time it takes for the shrubs and the trees to give you canopy cover. And if you plant at very wide spacings, as we've got here, you can expect a decade or more of open spaces which are vulnerable to becoming swamped by weeds. And in fact, there are many instances where we have seen native plantings lost due to lack of weed control well into the distance. So we've got these two options, if you like, continuum really from high density planting to lower density planting. The high density planting is the high cost at 2 metre spacing or a bit less. We're always recommending mimic nature and plant some of your early successional shrub species as a nurse, and then interplant your tree species at a lower proportion. So a 3-to-1, 4-to-1 mix of shrubs to trees. And this high density planting is essential for very weedy sites to get on top of the blackberry and the gorse and the broom and everything else that's going to come in there and try and swamp your trees, but particularly if you don't want a long extended period of weed control. With the low density planting, it's cheaper, certainly cheaper if you use smaller seedlings, but far more risk. My experience is that people that do plant tend to forget to put the effort in after planting, and you run the risk, particularly at these lower density plantings, of forgetting to do critical weed control, animal control, you know, and so this option is obviously cheaper for larger scale. It's certainly better for sites where there's no major weeds, so that in time it will get canopy cover even at this low density planting. So reducing the costs starts at the nursery, obviously, and we have done trials over the years. And again, all of this is all reported in our website, of looking at large containers, bare-rooted seedlings, and those raised in smaller containers. And you'll see from some of our trials that you know, the smaller stock takes a lot more effort to keep alive in the field. And we're getting a lot of interest from various parties interested in converting pines to natives. And this can be some major blocks owned by iwi, through to quite small areas of only 1 or 2 hectares. The main problem with converting pines to clear-felled pines to native is there are a lot of woody weeds generally that come through. Your wilding pines can be a problem. So, and it's difficult to plant in amongst the slash and to carry out maintenance. And while we can expect some natural regeneration, you will almost definitely need to do selective weed control. So the challenges are quite site specific. Just a quick slide here looking at fire-resistant natives for planting green breaks. With climate change, you know, we're expecting to be more prolonged droughts and increased risks of fire. So is there scope for mixed species plantings for green breaks with a high proportion of natives that are less flammable? And a lot of work's been done by the fire department and by various fire research people and science, and sorting out which natives are low flammable species versus those that are moderate to high flammable species. So it's worthwhile having a look at some of those links down the bottom there for some more information about and how you can mix up your species a bit more to consider you know, fire-prone issues that are coming at us with climate change. And just lastly, a couple of slides here just to finish off this first bracket on some take-home messages. You know, and we've covered most of this, but, you know, for planning, what else has worked in your area? Use local expertise and practitioners to try and guide you, and start small, as I said, before you ramp up. Every site is different and every year is different, so feel your way. For seedlings, you know, eco-sourcing is a major issue, so you know you really got to get to know your nursery to make sure that they are actually eco-sourcing, avoiding cultivars, you know, checking out what grows naturally, and you know, and of course going to nurseries that are producing high-quality plants with good root-to-shoot ratios. So you might get lower cost, smaller natives, but this is offset by higher cost of maintenance after planting, so be wary of that. Site preparation. You know, if it's got lots of woody weeds on it, it's going to cost you a lot to do the site preparation, but really good site preparation pays off eventually. And there are various ways in which you can look at controlling grass, blanket spraying or spot spraying. Again, lots and lots of information available there. For planting, fertiliser, in my opinion, has not been proven to be of benefit for most plantings except on sand dunes. Hydrogel, I don't think has been proven yet. In all the trials that we've done, I haven't seen a practical benefit from that. Watering is impractical on a large scale. Mulch is expensive to cart in and to acquire, but it is good to use stakes to locate your plants, particularly if you've got lots of rank grass or weeds and you can't find what you planted, and you really need to get back to them quickly to manage them, to maintain them. And, you know, if you've got issues with droughts and what have you, planting in autumn and planting deeper and all those sort of things are part of some of the strategies that you can consider. We talked about the planting density, if you like, for high-profile sites and for weedy sites, keeping it relatively dense. But for large scale, you've really got to try and stretch your plants over a larger area. But it comes with pros and cons. But whatever you're doing, a planting pattern's got to be flexible so that you are targeting your best microsites rather than just planting them in straight lines for the sake of it. Maintenance. We must be committed long-term to maintaining natives. The most failures result from lack of weed control and lack of making sure that animals haven't come in the day after we've planted and eaten everything that we've planted. So, and as I say, smaller seedlings are cheaper, but they need more maintenance. Hand releasing is time-consuming, but using of sprays, there's always some spray drift, there's always some losses as a result of it. So keep that to a minimum and do it in a timely fashion. And number 7, ecological principles. What can we do to work with nature to help us get natural regeneration going? And that's really going to be quite site specific and species specific, so keep that in mind. And lastly, number 8, exotics. There are some exotics that could be useful as a nurse as a tool to get your natives away. Tree lucerne, for instance, on some sites, not all sites, can bring in the birds and underneath it allow the natives to come through. Pines and eucalypts just grow too fast, really. And while you might have an understory under them, how are you going to get rid of those big pines and eucs without destroying your understory of natives? Nevertheless, it doesn't stop some from promoting plant and forget radiata pine or promoting the pine as a nurse for natives. But, we feel, and I think most ecologists would agree, that this is not proven, really. We need further research to determine how you can transition from pines to native. I'm not saying it cannot be done, but, we really need to see that happen and see what sort of timeframes are involved, that sort of thing. And lastly, there are always weed issues with converting clear fell pines to natives, so keep that in mind as well. So just onto the second bracket of slides, planting database and toolkit. Tane's Tree Trust is surveyed and measured planted natives up to 100 years old from the top of the North Island to the bottom of the South Island, as you can see here. That's given us a database of 15,000 native trees and shrubs ranging from 5 to 100 years old. And so we've got growth data on something like 60 different native tree and shrub species. And we are using that database to develop our native forestry toolkit. Under number 1 there, we've got the planted native forestry calculators, a growth and yield calculator, carbon calculator, economic models which have been used for calculating the economics of planting natives and managing it long term. Number 2, we've got customized planting design and costing tools. We've got a really exciting planting and budgeting calculator, which is coming online in December. We've already got a lot of our best practice planting information on the website, so there'll be links to that. And then finally down the bottom, with Trees That Count, we are developing, monitoring and mapping apps for planters to be able to follow through the success or otherwise of their plantings and provide a track record as to how well their work is going and how they can change their management to get even more improved outcomes. So this is just a snapshot of our planting and budgeting calculator, which we've started to circulate around some user groups, and we're getting excellent feedback. And you can plug in your area, your spacing, your preferred trees and shrubs, all drop-down menus, very easy to use. And out the end of it, after all these costs have been worked in, and there are default costs already in here built in, you get a report, a one-page report, which tells you what species you are planting, how many of each species you need to order, and what is the cost of your total project based on the area that you put in. So watch out for that, that calculator. In terms of the carbon calculator, we have underpinned this with our growth and yield models, developed our carbon models for natives. This graph here shows from 0 to 140 years along the horizontal axis, and then along the vertical axis, we've got our carbon dioxide equivalents in tonnes per hectare. Now you can see that radiata pine is just shooting for the roof from a very early age. And our natives, they take, sort of 20 to 30 years to get going. So all of these lines here are various tree species, as you can see, Kauri, Totara, and what have you. But you'll notice that the nurse crop species that we use, the shrubs, they kick off a bit quicker, and they last for about 20 to 30 years, but then they start to tail off. But by then they've done the job of providing a nurse for the trees, which have then starting to take off. And notice the trajectory, that line, the slope of that line is not that different from radiata pine. It's just that it's taken 30 years longer to get going. So going into our carbon calculator, you can work out what are your carbon emissions, and you could also use the calculator to determine how much carbon your forest is sequestering. And there's a snapshot of the carbon calculator. There's some buttons that you press depending on what you want and what data you're going to stick in. By the time you put your data in, it spits out some information about how many trees you need to plant to offset your annual emissions for running your car around them, that sort of thing. So that's already up and running, and like I say, we're getting a lot of good feedback on that one as well. So working with nature, regeneration, there's 1 million hectares or more of erosion-prone hill country that would benefit from reforestation, identified by various groups. The cost of planting of 10 times radiata pine, it's not feasible to restore thousands of hectares of native forest by planting alone. But New Zealand's native forest has a remarkable ability to regenerate naturally, but it requires an understanding of natural succession processes. So what can we do to help nature do it for us? And some of those factors that prevent natural reversion are very similar to what prevent planted natives, is fencing out your grazing stock, control of your pest animals, controlling your bird and seed predators, controlling the invasive weeds, and chances are supplementary planting will be required to fill in gaps. If you haven't got a local seed source, how close are you to the nearest native forest? There are options to look at establishing seed islands, for instance, which we've done on this farm here, just a network of seed islands in amongst what will be planted Manaka and Kanaka. So assisting natural regeneration is likely to be cheaper and easier than planting, but there are challenges in defining, what is regeneration, how are we going to monitor the success of reversion, and what sort of timeframes are involved. So, but we can sort of see from Northland how a lot of our land, despite being grazed, has a propensity to go back into native forest by itself. Admittedly, these are the less palatable species of Manaka, Kanaka, and Totara, the gorse and what have you. But nevertheless, on your worst bits of land, steep hill faces, nature is actually already reverting some of it back into natives. And this can be integrated into existing land use. It's not competing with it, it can be enhancing it. So lastly, silviculture and continuous cover forestry. We've gone into some of these regenerating farm stands and looked at options for pruning and thinning, and finding that our natives respond like any tree to reduced competition. So this is a log that's been a small pole stand. It's about sort of 20 centimeters in diameter, where it's been growing very, very slowly as it's been competing with all its neighbours. Then about 4 years ago, we took out a lot of its neighbours and reduced the competition. And in the last 4 years, you can see that it's quadrupled its growth from being just 1 millimetre to 4 millimetres per year. So some spectacular results can result from thinning, and then pruning can improve stem form. So we've been working with various other groups in implementing continuous cover forestry practices, just taking out occasional trees, small groups of trees, leaving the forest intact for all the other benefits, but removing some high value logs for specialty timber. And we've had a continuous cover forestry manual that's been available for some time, written by Ian Barton, but just brand new. We have Paul Quinlan producing some wonderful guides on how to prune and thin totara, which will be part of a manual on totara. And Ian Brennan, another Tonnage Tree Trust trustee, is also producing videos on pruning and thinning, as well as planting and all that sort of stuff. Now, all of those things are slowly coming online via our website. So just to reiterate, go to our website, have a look at what we've got there in terms of downloadable free information. I just draw your attention to Otata Ngāhere on the Pure Advantage website, where about 30 odd experts from out the country have contributed some excellent articles. I've just written one here on the 10 golden rules for large scale establishment of native forest. So have a look at that, and it gives you a much broader picture, perspective on how we are to tackle the establishment of native forest at scale, given the challenges ahead of us with regard to climate change and loss of biodiversity and that sort of thing. So that's it from me. Thank you very much, and I'm quite happy to answer any questions at any time.
Tēnā koe, David, ngā mihi nui kia koe, what a kōrero, eh? Very interesting kōrero there with regards to Tane's Tree Trust.